Cedar Ridge had always been a place where everyone knew each other, but preferred to pretend they didn't notice each other's secrets. This small Texas town, with a population of just over 12,000, lived a quiet life amid endless plains and oil derricks on the horizon. The main street stretched half a mile between the old water tower and the new shopping center, where most of the stores were either church shops or establishments related to cars in one way or another. Savannah Morgan never planned to stay in Cedar Ridge longer than necessary. At 23, she had already lived in Austin, tried her hand at college, worked as a waitress in several restaurants, and even dated a musician who promised to get her out of this Texas backwater. But life had a way of bringing people back to where they were trying to escape from. Savannah's mother, Debbie, had been a nurse at the local hospital for 20 years, and when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, Savannah knew she had no choice. She returned home to help pay for treatment and look after her younger brother, Jacob. The 16-year-old teenager needed stability, and their father had long since disappeared from their lives, leaving only debts and bitter memories. Working at a local restaurant called Dixie Diner barely brought in $300 a week, and her mother's medical bills were reaching thousands. Savannah quickly realized that honest work wasn't going to get her out of this mess. That's when she met Jessica Wright, who worked at the same hospital as a technician and moonlighted doing something completely different. "Listen, sweetie," Jessica said one evening as they sat in the hospital parking lot after another visit to Savannah's mother. "I know what you're thinking, but sometimes life puts us in situations where we have to choose between survival and morality." Jessica was 10 years older than Savannah, divorced, and raising 2 children on her own. She looked tired, but there was a certain steely determination in her eyes that comes from making difficult decisions. "It's not forever," Jessica continued, "just until you find something better, and it's a lot safer than you think if you know what you're doing." Savannah spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about Jessica's offer. She thought about her mother lying in the hospital, about Jacob, who deserved a normal future, about the bills that were piling up faster than she could pay them. In the end, she decided that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. The first few months were tough. Savannah worked through an online platform, meeting men in neighboring towns, sometimes traveling to Dallas or Houston. She quickly learned to tell who might be dangerous and who was just lonely. Most of her clients were the latter, divorced businessmen, widowers, middle-aged men who were looking not only for physical intimacy, but also for simple human connection. Richard Welch first contacted her on a cold February evening. His message was polite, with no hint of anything indecent. He suggested they meet at an expensive hotel restaurant in Dallas and said he was willing to pay for her time and travel expenses in advance. Something in his tone struck Savannah as different from her other clients. Richard Welch was the owner of Welch Motors, the largest car dealership in Cedar Ridge. At 52, he looked his age, but he stood straight and dressed expensively. His gray hair was neatly combed back, and his eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses seemed tired and a little sad. "You're not from Dallas," he said when they met in the hotel lobby. It wasn't a question. "No," Savannah replied. "Are you?" "Cedar Ridge, a small town an hour away." Savannah felt her heart skip a beat. She hadn't expected to meet anyone from her hometown. "I know Cedar Ridge," she said cautiously. "Then you understand why I prefer to meet in Dallas?" Richard smiled. "Small towns don't forgive certain things." They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, talking about books, travel, and how the world had changed in recent years. Richard was an educated man, having graduated from the University of Austin, but he had returned to Cedar Ridge to run the family business after his father's death. He had been married for 18 years and divorced 2 years ago. "Karen said I'd become boring," he said, twisting a napkin in his hands. "That I only lived to work and didn't know how to enjoy life. I guess she was right." "Do you think she was right?" Savannah asked. "Honestly, I don't know. I just did what I thought a man should do. I worked, supported my family, saved money for my children's future, but apparently, that wasn't enough." In the hotel room, Richard was gentle and cautious. He didn't rush, didn't demand anything special, just wanted to feel close to another person. Afterward, he lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, and Savannah realized that this man was deeply lonely. "Can I see you again?" he asked as they said goodbye. "Of course," Savannah replied. "Just write to me." Richard began writing to her every week. They met in Dallas, sometimes in Fort Worth, always in nice hotels, always with dinner and long conversations. Gradually, Savannah began to understand that Richard saw her not just as an escort, but as someone he could talk to about what was bothering him. He told her about his children, 15-year-old Emily and 12-year-old Ben, whom he only saw on weekends. He told her how hard it was to watch his marriage fall apart without knowing what to do to fix it. He told her about the nights he lay alone in his big house listening to the clock ticking on the mantelpiece. "You know what's strange?" he said one day. "I've spent my whole life dreaming of being successful. Build a business, buy a big house, give my kids a good education. And now that I have all that, I realize I've never been so lonely." Savannah listened to him and thought about her own loneliness, about how she lied to her mother and brother about where she got her money, about how she smiled at her clients but felt empty inside, about how she was afraid to get attached to anyone because she knew that sooner or later she would have to lie to them too. But with Richard, it was different. He knew who she was and didn't judge her for it. What's more, he seemed to understand what had led her to this life because he felt cornered by circumstances himself. "I think we're both doing what we have to do to survive," he said once. "We just have different ways of doing it." After 3 months of seeing each other, Richard made her an unusual offer. "Listen, Savannah," he said over dinner at a Dallas restaurant. "I know you have other clients, and I understand that this is your job. But what if I paid for all your time, say $5,000 a month, and you wouldn't have to see anyone else?" Savannah looked at him in surprise. "That's a very generous offer. But why would you want that?" "Because I enjoy spending time with you, because you make me feel alive, and because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because I don't want to share you with anyone else." At that moment, Savannah realized that their relationship had entered dangerous territory. She saw the way Richard looked at her and knew that this was no longer just a favor to her, but $5,000 a month would solve all her financial problems. She could focus entirely on her mother's treatment and not worry about money. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course. Take your time. Just know that this is a sincere offer." All the way home, Savannah thought about Richard's words. She knew she was making a decision that would change her life, but she also knew she might not have a choice. Savannah gave Richard her answer a week after his proposal. She met him at the same Dallas hotel where they usually spent time together, but this time the atmosphere was tense. Richard nervously fidgeted with the edge of the tablecloth, waiting for her decision. "I accept," she said, looking him in the eyes. "But I have conditions." "I'm listening." "No one in Cedar Ridge should know about our relationship. We will only meet in other cities. And if I feel that the situation is getting out of control, I have the right to terminate our agreement." Richard nodded, but she saw something in his eyes that alarmed her, relief mixed with possessiveness. "Of course, everything will be exactly as you want." During the first month of their new arrangement, everything went smoothly. Richard transferred the money punctually. They met twice a week, and Savannah felt financially stable for the first time in a long time. Her mother's treatment was progressing well, the chemotherapy was showing positive results, and Jacob even joined the school basketball team. But gradually, Savannah began to notice changes in Richard's behavior. He started calling her every day, sometimes just to talk. He began giving her gifts, expensive jewelry she couldn't wear at home, designer handbags she had to hide in the garage. "Richard, this is too much," she said when he gave her a diamond bracelet. "We agreed on money. I don't need gifts." "But I like giving you gifts," he replied. "Is that wrong?" "No, it's not wrong, but it changes the nature of our relationship." "What if I want it to change?" The question hung in the air between them. Savannah realized that Richard was starting to treat her like a real girlfriend, not an escort. It was dangerous for both of them. Meanwhile, a man from Savannah's past showed up in Cedar Ridge. Marcus Thorne, her ex-boyfriend from Austin, had returned to town after spending 2 years in prison for burglary. He was a year older than Savannah, tall, with tattoos on his arms and neck, and always knew how to charm women with his bad boy reputation. "Hey, beautiful," he said as she was leaving the grocery store. "Did you miss me?" Savannah felt her heart skip a beat. She hadn't seen Marcus since he was arrested and hoped she never would again. "What are you doing here, Marcus?" "Living, working, trying to get my life back together after what happened in Austin." He looked her up and down. "You look good. Really good. Where'd you get the money for those clothes?" "I'm working." "Waitressing at Dixie Diner?" "Come on, Savannah. I know how much they pay there. That wouldn't even cover the gas for your new car." Savannah realized that Marcus had already studied her life. He had always been observant, and prison had apparently only heightened that quality. "That's none of your business, Marcus." "Maybe it's none of my business. But you know what? I think we should meet and talk, for old time's sake." There was a hidden threat in his voice, and Savannah knew it was best not to ignore it. They met the next day in an old park on the outskirts of town. Marcus looked thinner than before, but there was a new hardness in his eyes. "So," he said, lighting a cigarette, "tell me about your new life. I'm curious how my ex-girlfriend got so rich so fast." "Marcus, I'm not going to..." "Listen, Savannah, I'm not stupid. I can see what's going on. The expensive clothes, the new car, the fact that you can suddenly afford to have your mother treated at a private clinic. Plus, I've heard rumors." "What rumors?" "About someone from our town who regularly travels to Dallas to meet girls. Someone rich. Someone who can afford to pay for expensive services." Savannah felt the blood drain from her face. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe I don't. But you know what? I don't need to. I need money. $5,000 to be exact. And I think you have a way to get it." "Marcus, I can't." "You can. And you will. Because if you don't, I'll start telling people in town how I think you make a living. And I think your mother and brother will be very surprised." After that conversation, Savannah couldn't sleep for several nights. She knew Marcus was capable of blackmail, and she knew that if he started spreading rumors about her, her life in Cedar Ridge would become unbearable. Meanwhile, Richard had his own problems. His ex-wife Karen had filed for a modification of the alimony agreement, demanding an increase in child support payments. In addition, she had begun to suspect that Richard was spending money on something that was not related to his usual expenses. "Richard," she said when he came to pick up the children for the weekend, "I need to talk to you." Karen Welch, at 48, was still an attractive woman. She worked as a real estate agent and knew what money looked like and where it could be spent. "What about?" "Your finances. I got your bank statements for the court, and I see that you're spending an unusual amount of money. Hotels, restaurants, purchases that aren't related to your business or the children." "Karen, we're not married anymore. My expenses are my business. Not when they affect how much money you can pay for our children. I know you're hiding something, Richard, and I'm going to find out what it is. Are you threatening me?" "I'm just telling the truth. If you're spending money on gambling, alcohol, or anything else that could affect your ability to be a good father, I have a right to know." After that conversation, Richard became even more paranoid. He started changing the hotels where he met Savannah and began paying with cash instead of credit cards. But most importantly, he started talking about wanting to be with her outside of their paid encounters. "Savannah," he said one night as they lay in bed in a hotel in Fort Worth, "what if we try dating for real?" "What do you mean?" "I mean a real relationship. No money, no contracts, just the two of us who like each other." Savannah felt panic rising. "Richard, that's impossible. We're from different worlds." "Why is it impossible?" "Yes, there's an age difference, but we get along well. We can talk to each other. I enjoy spending time with you. But the people in the city, screw the people in the city. Karen once told me that I don't know how to take risks, that I'm too cautious. Maybe it's time to change that. Savannah realized that Richard was serious. He had fallen in love with her, and it created a whole new dynamic in their relationship. She also felt an attachment to him, but she knew that a real relationship between them was impossible. "I need some time to think," she said. "Of course, but think about it seriously. We could be happy together." Meanwhile, in Cedar Ridge, an event occurred that changed the balance of power in the town. A new police chief was appointed. She was Detective Stella Crawford, who had transferred from Houston after a corruption scandal in her previous department. Stella Crawford was a 45-year-old woman who had spent more than 20 years in the police force. She was divorced, had no children, and her job was her life. She moved to Cedar Ridge to start a new life and prove that she could run a small-town police department. "I know some of you may doubt my abilities," she said at her first meeting with the officers. "But I'm not here to play politics or turn a blind eye to problems. I'm here to make sure the law is upheld for everyone, no matter who they are or how much money they have." One of the first cases that caught Stella's attention was reports of possible prostitution in the area. Several residents had complained about seeing young women meeting men at hotels outside the city and then returning home with expensive gifts. It could be nothing, Sergeant Tommy Reynolds, who had been with the department for 15 years, told her. "Just town gossip." "Maybe," Stella agreed, "but I think we should keep our eyes open. If something illegal is going on here, we need to know about it." By the end of the second month of their agreement, Savannah felt trapped. Marcus continued to demand money, threatening to tell everyone about her job. Richard was becoming increasingly obsessed with the idea of a real relationship with her. And the new police chief, she heard, was starting to ask questions about the unusual behavior of some of the town's residents. "I feel like everything is falling apart," she told Jessica when they met at a cafe on the outskirts of town. "What exactly is falling apart?" "Everything. My ex-boyfriend is back and blackmailing me. Richard wants a real relationship, and now the new police chief is starting to ask questions." "Maybe it's time to stop," Jessica suggested. "You've saved enough money for your mother's treatment. Maybe it's time to find another way to make money." "But what will I tell Richard? He already paid for next month." "Tell him the truth, that it's getting too complicated." "What if he reacts badly? What if he starts to take revenge?" Jessica looked at her with concern. "Savannah, are you afraid of him?" "I don't know. Maybe. He's changed. More possessive. He talks about us as if we're really together. Then you definitely need to stop. When a client starts to think he owns you, it's dangerous." But stopping was easier said than done. Savannah realized she was tangled in a web of her own making. Every decision she made only made things more complicated. At the end of the month, Richard suggested they meet at his place instead of a hotel. "It'll be safer," he said. "No one will know you're there, and we can spend more time together." "Richard, I don't think that's a good idea." "Why? Don't you trust me?" "It's not about trust. It's about the fact that meeting at your house will change everything. It will look like a real relationship." "What if that's what I want?" Savannah realized she couldn't put off the decision any longer. She had to either agree to his terms or find a way to end their relationship without destroying her life. Savannah spent 3 days thinking about Richard's proposal to meet at his house. She knew it was crossing a line, but the pressure was becoming unbearable. Marcus called her every day, reminding her of her debt, and her mother needed additional treatment, which cost even more money. In the end, she agreed. Richard Welch's house was located in the most prestigious neighborhood of Cedar Ridge, on a street lined with mansions belonging to the local elite. The 2-story brick house with columns at the entrance and a well-kept garden looked like the embodiment of the middle-class American dream. When Savannah parked in the garage as he had told her, she felt she was making a mistake. "Welcome to my home," Richard said, greeting her at the side door. He was dressed in an expensive shirt and jeans, looking relaxed and happy. Inside, the house was furnished with expensive but impersonal furniture. Savannah immediately realized that this was the work of an interior designer, not a reflection of the owner's personality. Family photos hung everywhere. Richard with his children, old pictures with his ex-wife, which he hadn't bothered to take down for some reason. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked, leading her into the living room. "Water, please." He poured her some water and himself a whiskey, then sat down next to her on the sofa, closer than usual. "You know, I've dreamed of bringing you here for so long," he said. "I've always felt that hotels aren't the place to really get to know someone." "Richard, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I think we need to rethink our relationship. It's getting too complicated." His expression changed. The relaxed look disappeared, and something appeared in his eyes that alarmed Savannah. "What do you mean?" "I mean that we're both starting to forget that this is a business relationship. It's dangerous for both of us." "Dangerous?" He put his glass down on the table a little too hard. "Savannah, I'm offering you a real life, stability, security, love. What's dangerous about that?" "Richard, there's almost 30 years between us. We're from different worlds, people in the city. I don't give a damn about people in the city." He stood up and began pacing the room. "All my life I've done what was expected of me. I married the right girl, built the right business, lived in the right house. And what did I get? A wife who left me because I was too boring, kids who see me 2 days a week, and loneliness. I understand how you feel, but..." "No, you don't." He turned to her, and there was so much pain in his eyes that Savannah felt compassion. "You're the only one who makes me feel alive, the only one who really listens to me. I'm 52 years old, Savannah. How many more chances at happiness do I have?" "Richard, please sit down." He sat down, but not next to her, but in a chair across from her. "Listen to me carefully," Savannah said. "I can't give you what you want. Not because I don't want to, but because I can't. I have commitments, problems that you don't understand." "What problems? Tell me. Maybe I can help." "My ex-boyfriend is back in town. He knows about my job and he's blackmailing me." Richard sat up straight. "What does he want?" "Money. $5,000, or he'll tell everyone in town what I do." "What's his name?" "Richard, don't." "What's his name, Savannah?" "Marcus Thorne." "Thorne," Richard repeated. "I know that name. His father was a mechanic at the auto shop." "Yes, that's him." "Richard, I can handle this myself." "No, you can't. He'll just ask for more and more. You can't stop people like that by giving them money once." "Then what do you suggest?" "Let me talk to him." "What?" "No, that'll only make things worse." "Savannah, I won't let that bastard ruin your life. Or our life." There was something in his voice that made Savannah wary. She realized that Richard was willing to go to extreme lengths for their relationship. "Promise me you won't do anything without my consent." "I promise," he said, but Savannah saw him cross his fingers behind his back. The next day, Karen Welch hired a private investigator named Jack Meredith. Meredith was a retired Dallas police officer who now worked as a private investigator. Karen wanted to find out what her ex-husband was spending his money on. "I know he's hiding something," she told Meredith in his office. "His behavior has changed. He's become more secretive, more self-satisfied, I guess. Plus, there's all this unexplained spending." "Mrs. Welch, you do realize that I may uncover things you won't like?" "I'm prepared for that. I need to know the truth, especially when it comes to my children." Meredith began following Richard the very next day. He was a professional and knew how to remain unnoticed. Soon he noticed a pattern. Richard regularly traveled to Dallas and met with a young woman at expensive hotels. Meanwhile, Detective Stella Crawford continued her unofficial investigation. She analyzed crime statistics in the county and noticed an interesting pattern. Over the past few months, there had been a significant increase in reports of domestic violence and financial disputes. "Sergeant Reynolds," she said, calling him into her office. I want you to discreetly check all cases where residents of our city have been arrested for prostitution-related crimes in neighboring counties. That could take some time, boss. We have time. I have a feeling there's something going on in this town that we don't know about. Reynolds conducted the check and discovered that over the past year, several Cedar Ridge residents had been arrested in other cities for various prostitution-related crimes, both as clients and as service providers. Boss, I found something interesting, he reported to Stella. It looks like some of our residents are leading double lives outside the city. Keep digging, but do it quietly. Meanwhile, Marcus Thorne was growing increasingly impatient. He knew Savannah was dragging her feet on the pavement and decided to turn up the pressure. "Savannah," he said when they met in the same park, "my patience is running out. I need the money by the end of the week or I'll start telling stories." "Marcus, I need more time." "You don't have time. I've already talked to a couple of people in town. I hinted that I have some interesting information about how certain people make money." "You wouldn't dare." "Try me. You know what I think? I think your rich client will pay even more to keep his reputation in the clean." Savannah felt the blood drain from her veins. "You know who he is?" "Of course I do. It's hard not to notice when someone from our little town starts traveling to Dallas regularly. Plus, I have eyes and ears everywhere. Marcus, if you do this, you'll ruin not only my life, but his family's as well." "I don't care. I need the money to start a new life. And if anyone gets hurt in the process, that's their problem." After that conversation, Savannah realized she had no choice. She had to tell Richard what Marcus knew about him. She met Richard the next day at his house. He was in a good mood, had prepared dinner, and set the table for two. "Savannah, I'm so glad you agreed to come back. See, we can be like a normal couple. Richard, we need to talk about Marcus." His face darkened. "What about him?" "He knows about you. He knows we're seeing each other, and now he's threatening to tell your wife and children if he doesn't get money." "How much does he want?" "5,000. But that's just the beginning. He'll never stop." Richard stood up silently and walked over to the window. He stood with his back to her for several minutes, and Savannah could see how tense his shoulders were. "Richard, I won't let him ruin our lives," he said without turning around. "What do you mean?" "There are ways to stop people like that." "What ways?" He turned to her, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart beat faster. "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Richard, promise me you won't do anything stupid. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to protect us." That evening, Karen Welch received a report from a private investigator. Meredith brought her a folder with photos and documents. "Mrs. Welch, what I'm about to show you may be painful." "Show me." He laid the photos out on the table. They showed Richard and a young woman entering a hotel, leaving a restaurant, and embracing in a car. "Who is she?" Karen asked. "Her name is Savannah Morgan. She's 23 years old from Cedar Ridge. She works as a waitress at a local restaurant, but apparently she also provides escort services." "Escort services," Karen repeated. "You mean my ex-husband is spending money on prostitutes?" "It looks like it. He's been seeing her regularly for several months. He pays for hotels, dinners, and expensive gifts." Karen felt a mixture of rage and disgust. "How much is he spending?" "From what I've seen, several thousand a month. And that's money he could be spending on his children." "Mrs. Welch, what do you plan to do with this information?" "I'm going to show it to my lawyer. If Richard is spending money on prostitutes, it could affect the court's decision on custody." After the detective left, Karen sat in her living room looking at the photos. She couldn't believe that the man she had been married to for 18 years had stooped so low as to buy women. But what angered her even more was that he was doing it while complaining about not having enough money for alimony. She decided that she would show the photos to her lawyer the next day. Meanwhile, Savannah returned home in a state of deep unease. Something about Richard's behavior frightened her. She saw a determination in his eyes that could lead to trouble. She tried to call Marcus to warn him, but he didn't answer. She left a message on his answering machine. "Marcus, it's Savannah. We need to talk. It's important. Please call me back." But Marcus didn't call back. He was too busy planning his next move. He realized that he could get much more out of this situation than just $5,000. If he played his cards right, he could set himself up for a long time. The next day, he went to Welch Motors and asked to see the owner. "Mr. Welch," he said when he was shown into Richard's office, "I think we have something to talk about." The meeting between Richard and Marcus in the car dealership's office was tense from the very first minute. Richard sat behind his massive oak desk, trying to maintain an appearance of control, while Marcus sprawled in the chair opposite him, ostentatiously examining the expensive furnishings. "Mr. Thorne," Richard began, clasping his hands on the table, "Savannah told me about your demands." "Good," Marcus smiled. "That means we can talk straight. I need $10,000. "10? Savannah said 5. The price has gone up. You see, Mr. Welch, when I found out that my buyer was one of the richest men in town, I realized I had underestimated the value of my merchandise." Richard felt anger rising in his chest. "This is blackmail. This is business. I have information that could destroy your reputation, your relationship with your children, possibly even your business. 10,000 is a bargain for such a valuable service as silence. And what guarantee do I have that you won't come back for more?" "Nothing," Marcus replied bluntly. "But the alternative is much worse, isn't it?" After Marcus left, Richard realized he had been trapped. This bastard would never stop. Even if he paid $10,000 now, Marcus would be back in a month for 20, and then 30. That evening, Richard met Savannah at his house. She was in a good mood, wearing the expensive new dress he had bought her jewelry sparkling in the light of the fireplace. "Richard, I wanted to thank you for everything you're doing for me," she said, hugging him. "Thanks to you, Mom is getting the best care, and Jacob can focus on his studies without worrying about money. It's no problem, Savannah. I enjoy taking care of you. And I love that you can afford to," she smiled. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said about an exclusive relationship. Maybe we could extend our contract?" "What do you mean?" "Well, 7,000 a month instead of 5, and then I'll be completely yours. No other clients, no distractions." Richard felt a mixture of joy and bitterness. Savannah wanted to be with him, but only for the money. She saw him as a walking wallet, not a man. 7,000, he repeated. "Think about it. You'll have my undivided attention, and I'll be able to help my family even more." "What about Marcus? What about him? He could cause problems for us." Savannah waved her hand dismissively. "Richard, you worry too much about Marcus. Yes, he might try to blackmail us, but you have money and connections. People like him can't really hurt people like you." "You think so?" "Of course. You're a respected businessman in this town. You have power. He's an ex-con who lives in a trailer. Who's going to believe him?" But Richard knew it wasn't that simple. The photos Marcus might have would speak for themselves. "Savannah, what if Marcus disappears?" "What do you mean?" "Well, what if he decides to leave town, find a job somewhere else? That would be ideal, but I don't think he'll leave voluntarily. He likes having power over people. There are ways to convince people to leave." Savannah looked at him curiously. "What ways?" "Various ways. The main thing is to find the right motivation." Later that night, after Savannah had gone home, Richard sat in his office and thought about the situation. Marcus was a problem that wouldn't go away on its own. But there was another problem: Savannah. He knew she would never truly love him. To her, he was a source of income, nothing more. And what would happen when she decided she'd gotten enough money out of him? When she found someone younger, more attractive, willing to pay even more? He opened his desk drawer and took out a business card that one of his clients had given him a few years ago. The owner of a chain of auto repair shops who had hinted at connections with some not-so-law-abiding people. "If you ever need help with a delicate matter," the client had said, "call this number." Richard dialed the number. Yes? A rough male voice answered. My name is Richard Welch. Eddie Ruskin referred me. Pause. Where would you like to meet? The parking lot of the Pine Ridge Shopping Center. Tomorrow at noon. I'll be in a blue pickup truck. The next day, Richard met a man who introduced himself simply as Vince. The man, in his 40s and dressed in work clothes, looked like an ordinary mechanic. I have two problems, Richard said. Two problems that need to be solved once and for all. What kind of problems? A man who's blackmailing me, and a woman who could be a witness. Vince nodded. I see. That'll be $30,000. For both problems. When can it be done? Within a week, but it has to look natural. An accident, a robbery, something like that. I don't care how it looks. Just make them disappear. Half now, half after the job is done. Richard handed Vince an envelope containing $15,000 in cash. What are their names? Marcus Thorne and Savannah Morgan. Vince wrote the names in his notebook. Addresses? Richard gave him all the necessary information, feeling as if he were watching himself from the outside. Was he really ordering the murder of two people? The job will be done neatly, Vince assured him. No one will connect it to you. Meanwhile, Detective Stella Crawford continued her investigation. Her informant, Barney Clark, told her another interesting detail. Detective, I saw that guy Thorne taking pictures of someone near a hotel in Dallas last week. Who exactly? A middle-aged man with a young woman. Thorne was hiding behind some cars, taking pictures with his phone. Can you describe these people? The man was wearing an expensive suit and looked like a businessman. The woman was young and pretty. Stella realized that Marcus Thorne was gathering dirt on someone. That could explain his sudden confidence that he was about to strike it rich. Barney, if you see Thorne again, call me immediately. At the same time, Karen Welch was preparing to file a petition with the court. Her lawyer, David Collins, had compiled an impressive dossier on Richard. Karen, we have all the evidence we need, he said. Bank statements, photographs, witness statements. The court won't be able to ignore such obvious facts. When are we filing? Tomorrow morning. By evening, all the information will be part of the court case. And that means it will be public? Exactly. Richard will no longer be able to hide his lifestyle. Savannah, meanwhile, was enjoying her new status. The $7,000 a month from Richard allowed her not only to pay for her mother's treatment, but also to buy beautiful clothes, rent a better apartment for her family, and even consider sending Jacob to a private school. She met Jessica at a cafe on the outskirts of town. You look happy, Jessica remarked. I am happy. Richard increased our agreement. Now I get $7,000 a month. That's great. But aren't you afraid he's getting too attached? Let him get attached. As long as he pays, I'm fine with it. What about Marcus? What about Marcus? Richard can handle him. He has money and influence. Savannah, be careful. When men start to think they own a woman, it can be dangerous. Richard isn't dangerous. He's a soft, kind man. Kind men can be dangerous too if they're pushed to extremes. But Savannah didn't listen to the warnings. She was too happy with her new financial situation. On Thursday evening, the first murder took place. Marcus Thorne was found dead in his trailer. His neighbor, an elderly man named Harold Simmons, discovered the body when he came to check on Marcus because he wasn't answering his phone. I knocked on his door all day, he told Officer Reynolds. Marcus owed me $20 he borrowed last week. The door wasn't locked, so I went in and found him in the bedroom. Marcus was lying on the floor near the bed. At first glance, it looked like a robbery. Drawers were pulled out, things were scattered around, and his wallet was empty. Detective Stella Crawford arrived at the scene half an hour later. What do we have? She asked Reynolds. At first glance, a robbery gone wrong. The victim is Marcus Thorne, 28 years old. He was struck on the head with a blunt object. Anything missing? Money from his wallet, maybe some electronics, but it's strange. What's strange? The victim's phone is on the kitchen table. Burglars usually take phones. Stella carefully examined the crime scene. Something about it bothered her. "Sergeant, I need to know who Thorne had been seeing in the last few days. Check his phone, talk to his neighbors." "Already on it, boss." On Friday morning, while the whole town was still discussing the murder of Marcus Thorne, a second murder occurred. Savannah Morgan was found dead in her car in a shopping center parking lot. She was discovered by security guard Millie Johnson, who had arrived at work at 6 in the morning. "At first I thought the girl was asleep in her car," Millie told Detective Crawford. "It happens sometimes, but when I knocked on the window, she didn't respond." Savannah was sitting in the driver's seat, leaning back. The cause of death was not obvious at first glance. "No visible wounds," noted the arriving doctor. "An autopsy will be necessary to determine the cause of death." Stella examined the car inside and out. No signs of a struggle, no damage. Savannah's purse was on the passenger seat. Her money and credit cards were there. "This isn't a robbery," she told Reynolds. "Then what is it?" "I don't know. But 2 murders in 2 days in a small town like this can't be a coincidence." Officer Reynolds checked Savannah's phone. The last call was yesterday evening at 9:47. The number was listed in her contacts as R. "Chief, maybe we should check who R is. Check it out and find a connection between these 2 victims." By noon, news of the second murder had spread throughout Cedar Ridge. The town was in shock. 2 murders in 2 days. That hadn't happened here in over 10 years. Richard Welch learned of Savannah's death when his secretary turned on the local news in his office. 23-year-old Savannah Morgan was found dead this morning. This is the second murder in our city in 2 days. Richard felt the world around him freeze. Savannah was dead. The woman he loved, the only bright spot in his life, was gone. Detective Stella Crawford spent the weekend studying all available information on the double murder. On Monday morning, she called a meeting in the police department's conference room. "So what do we know?" she began, hanging photos from the crime scenes on the board. "Marcus Thorne, 28 years old, killed on Thursday evening between 9 and 11 o'clock. Cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head. Scenery consistent with a robbery." Sergeant Reynolds added, "The neighbors didn't hear anything. Thorne lived alone and didn't have any close friends in town." "Savannah Morgan, 23 years old, found dead on Friday morning," Stella continued. "The coroner's preliminary conclusion is poisoning. The exact poison is still unknown." "Any connection between the victims?" Officer Jones asked. "That's the key question. Thorne was recently released from prison and worked in construction. Morgan was a waitress at a local restaurant and lived with her mother and younger brother." Reynolds raised his hand. "Chief, I checked Thorne's phone. Over the last week, he made a lot of calls to one number. The number is registered to a Jessica Wright. Find her and bring her in for questioning." "What about Morgan's phone?" "The last call was to a number listed as R. I want to know who that is." That same day, Jessica Wright sat in the interrogation room, nervously fingering her purse. She knew this moment would come sooner or later. "Mrs. Wright," Stella began, "tell me about your relationship with Marcus Thorne." "We dated for a few months." "Dated?" "Well, we spent time together, nothing serious." "When was the last time you saw him?" "Wednesday evening. He came to my house." "What did you talk about?" Jessica hesitated. "He said he was going to have a lot of money soon." "From where?" "I don't know. Marcus was secretive." Stella sensed that the woman was hiding something. "Mrs. Wright, this is a murder investigation. If you know anything, it's best to tell us now." "Marcus said he knew something about some important people in town, that he could make money off this information." "What kind of important people?" "He didn't say any names. He just hinted that they were rich." "What about Savannah Morgan? Did you know her?" Jessica hesitated again. "Yes, we were acquainted." "How exactly?" "We worked in the same field." "What field?" "Escort services." Stella felt she was getting closer to the truth. "So you were both working as escorts?" "Yes. Savannah did it to pay for her mother's medical bills." "Did she have regular clients?" "One." a wealthy man from around here. She'd only been seeing him for the last few months. Name? She never said, just that he paid well and drove a nice car, and that he owned a car dealership. After the interrogation, Stella sent Reynolds to check Savannah's bank records. The results were quick. Boss, every month, $5,000 was deposited into Morgan's account. The transfers were always made in cash through the First National Bank ATM. Meanwhile, Karen Welch filed the papers in court. By Monday evening, the information that Richard Welch was spending money on escort services was public knowledge. On Tuesday morning, Detective Crawford came to Richard's office. "Mr. Welch, I need to ask you a few questions." "About what?" "About Savannah Morgan." Richard felt his pulse quicken. "I read in the news that she died. What a terrible tragedy." "Did you know her?" "I met her a couple of times." Stella took a photo out of the file. "Mr. Welch, we have evidence that you met with Miss Morgan regularly over a period of several months." Richard realized it was useless to deny it. "Yes, we met." "In what capacity?" "She was providing me with escort services." "When did you last see her?" "On Thursday evening." "Where?" "At my home." "What time did she leave?" "Around 10 o'clock." "How did she look when she left?" "Normal. Nothing unusual." "Mr. Welch, did you know Marcus Thorne?" "I've heard the name, but I don't know him personally." "He never contacted you?" "No." After the detective left, Richard felt relieved. The police knew about his connection to Savannah, but they didn't know about Marcus. For now, he was safe. Meanwhile, Stella received the results of Savannah's autopsy. The cause of death was cyanide poisoning, the medical examiner reported. The poison was slipped into her drink. Death occurred between 11 p.m. on Thursday and 1 a.m. on Friday. On Wednesday, there was a breakthrough in the investigation. Stella received a call from the owner of a small bar on the outskirts of town. "Detective, I saw the news about the murders. I think I have some information." "What kind of information?" "On Thursday evening, a man came in. He ordered a whiskey and seemed nervous. He asked if I knew anyone who could take care of problems." "Describe him." "Around 40, average height, expensive clothes. He drove a black BMW." "Did he leave a name?" "No, but he paid with a credit card. I have the receipt." Stella immediately drove to the bar. The check was made out to Vincent Morelli. A database check revealed that Morelli was a former Marine with a criminal record who was suspected of several contract killings in neighboring states. "Reynolds, find this Morelli. Check all the motels and hotels within a 100-mile radius." On Thursday evening, Morelli was found in a motel in the suburbs of Dallas. A search of the room revealed traces of cyanide and a gun with a silencer. "My name is Detective Crawford," Stella said as she entered the interrogation room. "You are under arrest on suspicion of the murders of Savannah Morgan and Marcus Thorne." Morelli remained silent, demanding a lawyer. "Vincent, we have cyanide from your room. We have a check from the bar. We have a witness who saw you in Cedar Ridge on the night of the murders." "No lawyer, no talk." But on Friday morning, Morelli's lawyer, after reviewing the evidence, advised his client to cooperate. "Vincent, there's enough evidence for the death penalty. The only way to avoid it is to tell the truth about who ordered the hit." "I was following orders," Morelli finally said. "I was paid to kill 2 people." "Who ordered the killings?" "Richard Welch. He owns a car dealership in Cedar Ridge." "Where did you meet him?" "In the parking lot of a shopping mall. He gave me $15,000 up front and promised another $15,000 after the job was done." "Why did he want them killed?" "He said the man was blackmailing him, and the woman could be a witness." "Do you have any proof of your meetings with Welch?" "I recorded the conversations on my phone, just in case." Stella obtained an arrest warrant for Richard Welch on Friday morning. She arrived at his home with 3 officers. "Mr. Welch, you are under arrest on suspicion of ordering the murders of Marcus Thorne and Savannah Morgan." Richard stood in the doorway of his home in his bathrobe, unable to believe what was happening. This is a mistake. I didn't kill anyone. We know. But you ordered the murder. We have the hitman who gave a full confession. We have recordings of your conversations. I want a lawyer. That's your right. At the police station, Richard realized the game was over. His lawyer, after reviewing the evidence, was brief. Richard, you have the killer's testimony, audio recordings of your conversations, and bank transfers against you. The best option is to plead guilty and hope for leniency from the court. But I didn't want this to happen. You ordered the murder of 2 people. The court won't be interested in your regrets. At the trial, Richard Welch was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Vincent Morelli received a life sentence in exchange for testifying against the person who ordered the murders. Debbie Morgan, Savannah's mother, was present at the sentencing. Detective Stella Crawford closed the case, but she continued to think about how greed and obsession could turn an ordinary person into a murderer. A year later, a new business opened on the site of Welch Motors. Life in Cedar Ridge went on, but the town would never forget this tragic story. 3 years later, Richard Welch sat in his cell in a Texas prison, reading a letter from his lawyer. Karen had finally received all of his assets, including his house and car dealership. His children, Emily and Ben, refused to see him. Emily's last letter simply said, "Don't write to us anymore. You are no longer our father." Every night, Richard lay on his narrow prison bunk and thought about Savannah. Not about how he had ordered her murder, but about those evenings when they talked in Dallas hotels. He convinced himself that it was love and that he had done what he had to do. The prison psychologist called it denial. In the cell next door sat a man convicted of drug trafficking. He often said, "You know what the worst thing about prison is? It's not the bars, it's not the guards, it's knowing that it's forever." Richard nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about how, if he could go back in time, he would do the same thing. Cedar Ridge slowly forgot about the story. New scandals and new problems replaced the old ones. But sometimes, especially on rainy evenings, the town's old-timers would remember the story and shake their heads. How money and loneliness had turned a respected businessman into a murderer. How a young woman trying to save her family became a victim herself. "That's how it is," they said to each other. "That's life." And life went on, leaving behind ruined lives and broken families, as it always did.